This time we are talking about the Oakland A's. They were in the run for the wild card spot for a majority of the season. But here with me to talk about the A's and their season is longtime A's fan Chris Posadas. Chris, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this, and I really do appreciate it.
All good, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me, man.
It's interesting. The story is you reach out to somebody, they lead you to a mutual friend and all this other stuff. And that's how it works. I mean, I feel like networking is the way to go nowadays, especially in this internet world.
Yeah, it is, right. And you're paying me, right?
Only in compliments. Only in compliments.
I don't want those. Those are worthless.
I wanted to get into the interview and start right away. Okay. How long have you been an A's fan, and what made you decide to choose the A's?
For as long as I can remember, I've been an A's fan. My dad was an A's fan. My mom's an A's fan. I can't remember not being an A's fan, so I was kind of like grandfathered into it. So pretty much my whole life, man.
It's crazy. Where I'm at in Delaware is interesting. I knew someone whose dad used to be a fan of the Philadelphia A's. That's at least the 50s and 60s. So, and he said, yeah, he remember go to Shibe Park and seeing the A's play. And what's even crazier, if you ever make it to Philadelphia, right out in front of Citizens Bank Park is a picture of Connie Mack. Nice. The Philadelphia A's, the Oakland A's, Kansas City A's logo, basically there, just talking about Connie Mack and his impact on Philadelphia and everything. And, it's crazy when you see something that you're so familiar with on the West Coast have like a little bit of a presence here on the East Coast.
Yes, that's when he used to wear suits to all the games, right? It was you imagine if the coaches wore suits now? It was like, okay, this looks out of place, man. Are they selling the team? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think by the time he was like 70 or 80, they probably were better off just selling the team. They went down a rabbit hole, and then it went to Kansas City, and then Oakland. Here they are.
Yeah, now they're trying to leave since 2004 again. So. Yeah, it's rough being an A's fan, man.
I wanted to ask, what is your biggest Oakland A's memory? I'm not sure how far back of a fan you go. Do you go back to the Moneyball days? Do you go back to the Bash Brothers days? Any further than that? I don't know. I'm curious.
So I go back to the Bash Brothers days, and actually the first game that I ever remember going to, it was actually Nolan Ryan's no-hitter at the Oakland Coliseum, and I remember we were sitting up in the upper deck behind home plate, and as it got deeper and deeper into the game, the pop in that glove just got louder and louder, and you hear no hits. You know what I'm saying? So it's just that was the first memory I have. The most memorable moment. Oh, what you got? You got a train running through the house right over there?
Yeah, I have my timer on just to make sure, okay. I'm not going to miss this.
The most memorable moment for me, though, was watching Scott Hatterberg hit that home run to finalize the 20-game win streak. Because we all thought that it was over there. I made it to 3 of the games during the run. So that was pretty cool. But man, that home run in the right field, we were supposed to go. We didn't go. But that was probably for me the most memorable.
Going into the season, what kind of expectations did you have for the A's? I know that last year's Bizarro World Season, as I call it, with the shortened season and the 16-team playoff, it was a little bit of not the norm, but going back to a full season, what were your expectations for the A's?
Leading up until this year, they've really overachieved. They weren't expected to do as well, kind of actually like how the Giants are played out this year. Nobody expected them to do as well as they did. But I was expecting them to be 1 or 2. I was expecting probably one of the wild card spots, but injuries happened. Laureano went out. I was like, oh, that's going to hurt the team, because defensively, it was like having Cespedes, where he can limit the extra base hits because of his arm. So people don't run or try to extend any hits. So looking at a lot of how it played out is disappointing, but, as an A's fan, you're kind of used to it. But I expected them to make the playoffs, especially giving 3/4 of the season that they were one of the top teams in the majors.
Was there a particular game or moment that you're thinking, yep, they're going to the playoffs?
Probably not a game, but I think at the end of the All-Star break is when I was like, you know what? I don't see any reason why they can't make the playoffs. And then you had a couple injuries. And then it was a nice pickup to go get Starlin Marte. I thought that was pretty good, because Jed Lowry, to me, I love Jed Lowry, but that dude has no range over there in the infield. But he can hit. He can definitely hit. But really just looking at them, I was like, it was more of a letdown. So I was like, all right, we'll wait till the end of the season. And then looking at how it played out their last month, I was like, you knew they weren't going to keep up with everybody. They kind of blew their wad a little bit early.
And as you mentioned, seeing that point where they weren't going to make it, was there a particularly indicting or damning moment that made you think, oh, this might be it?
Honestly, for me, when I started getting worried was when Laureano got hurt. I was like, all right, they got to figure something out. And I thought that them picking up Marte might have helped fill some gaps, but it wasn't anything particular. It was just kind of like, all right, you look at the standings and you're like, okay, they're not winning right now. They're going 4-6 in their last 10. They did that multiple times, but nothing in specificity.
I guess looking at the playoffs, who did you feel that the A's would have matched up well with in the American League?
I had a feeling that given the way that they play, I think the Yankees probably would have matched up pretty good with them. They have all the big names, but they always play each other really tough. So I think that they probably would have matched up pretty good against the Yankees. I think that they, in a 5-game series, probably could have pulled it out, surprised some people.
Who would you have been worried to see in the playoff matchup? Would it have been Tampa Bay? Would it have been the White Sox? Would it have been Houston?
Houston and White Sox for sure. The White Sox always have the A's number, even when they are in the cellar in the Central. For some reason, they just can't beat them, especially the games that I used to go to. So looking at them, they have the A's number. And then looking at how Houston pulled it out last year, they would have probably a little bit more confidence going into it. I don't think that the A's have really figured that puzzle out yet, especially they haven't figured out the playoffs in general. So really just kind of looking at them, if they make it past the first round, you're pleasantly surprised, but you don't ever expect them really to go any bit further. And that's sad as a fan, but I'm also kind of realistic watching sports for the last, 30 plus years.
One of the things I like to ask, I sort of like to ask a question off the board, but looking at the offensive production of the Mats, Olson, and Chapman, they combined for about 65 homers and 181 RBIs. And it seems like that aside from that, and you had pretty much solid production from everywhere else. What do you think the huge issue was for this year's team that caused them to struggle on the latter end of the season?
I mean, given the way that the ballpark is shaped, it's not a hitter's park. It's definitely a pitcher's park. So you don't get a lot of guys hitting for average when you come over to Oakland. And it's more going to be conducive to, lower ERAs. Man, it pisses me off to say this, but I loved Marcus Semien. And him hitting 44 home runs this year, not being in the A's lineup, I think them not re-signing him really kind of messed things up. Andrus never really seemed to fit in the lineup. Defensively, he's fantastic, but for the most part, they're a platoon team. So they don't really have a lot of go-to guys. When they do, they end up training them. So looking at Matt Chapman and looking at the corner spots, you already know that those guys are going to be solid. It's always trying to fill in the gaps. I wish there was a little bit more production from the catcher position, but given what that is, as long as they handle the pitchers well, that's all you can really ask for. But I think finding guys that are a little bit more accountable or regular instead of finding a group of platoon players, the A's go a little bit further than some other teams that try to do it. But when you compete against the teams that have a set lineup, it's a lot harder to compete in the long run. And we saw that happen.
I always look at the job that Bob Melvin does. He's been a solid manager in his time there. And especially you think about it, this is probably his third stint as a manager somewhere else. He was in Arizona. He was in Seattle, and that didn't work out well, and it worked out here. What is it that Bob Melvin does so well, especially being in Oakland, knowing with the constraints that he may have with the roster that may turn over often? What is it that he does well when it comes to dealing with the A's organization?
I mean, he's a master strategist. When it comes down to it, he's able to not only utilize what the statistics are, but he has a really good feel for the game and the team. So he knows when to put people into the right spots. Unfortunately, kind of didn't work out this year, but I think it would be a big mistake for them not to keep him as a head coach. If there's a day that they ever find the ability to spend money on players that are either in free agency or retaining guys, then they would really give him a better chance to show how good of a manager he really is. But he shows it year in and year out, given a lot of the roster constraints. So he's able to take whatever he has and make it successful. Whether it's looking at a team that would be a 100-loss team anywhere else, he could get that team to 500. He's really, really smart. He has a great coaching staff too. They're all very in tune. That they all communicate really well, and every player that's played for him has loved him. So there's something that he has as a former player that he's able to get into with the psyche of the guys on the team and allow them to really kind of be themselves and play ball.
And this is a question that you probably hear so many times as an A's fan. The future of the A's really hinges on a stadium. To you, where would you think the perfect stadium would be? Would it be on the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum spot, or would it be somewhere else and still in the area? I mean, where do you think the perfect new age stadium would be?
I mean, logistically, it makes sense to stay where they're at because they have a lot of transit right there. The bus drops people off right at the BART station, and they have a walkway that goes right over to it, and the BART station drops off right there. They have 2 exits on either side from the freeway, and it doesn't make sense to move them into Howard Terminal because that would just be a complete debacle. There's nowhere to get in and out of there without causing massive amounts of traffic. And it was in 2004, one of my friends worked for a land developer that was friends with Sandy Alderson, and he set up a meeting between the land developers and Lou Wolf and his team, and they made their presentation for a downtown stadium right by Lake Merritt, one down in Howard Terminal, and then another one restructuring the current lot. And after they did their presentation, Lou Wolf got up, shook hands, and bounced. So they weren't even trying to stay, even though I saw the plans and a lot of them made sense. But to not utilize the land that they're already on is kind of ridiculous because it's already made. All you have to do is knock down the Oracle Stadium where the Warriors are playing, and then you can put a whole little city in there with shops. You have a little mall. You could put in a lot of food there, things for kids, and it would just make the most sense to keep them exactly where they're at. But the ownership has shown in the past and recently that they don't want to stay in Oakland, which is unfortunate because that's going to take a lot of jobs away from the community, that work there and have worked there for the last, 20, 30 years.
I'm assuming them revamping the Coliseum, Mount Davis is the first thing to go, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be fine if they just redid it to the way it was in the 80s, where you had the snack bar in left center and a little grass outfield, and it was opened up a little bit so you could see out of the park. But the way that they restructured it when the Raiders came back absolutely destroyed the feel of baseball. So every time you went to a game there, and a lot of people don't like going to A's games just because of the stadium, because it's not really conducive to a fan experience. When you go to other parks, especially right across the water when you go to the Giants ballpark, it's beautiful. It's definitely something that you want to go take people to. It's Instagrammable. Oakland is not. But that's the thing I like about the Oakland fans, though, is that the stadium alone doesn't matter as much as what's on the field. And that's really where I think it separates a lot of people as A's fans from a lot of other fans, is because we love the team, regardless of how much they've abused us and lied to us and say, we're going to stay rooted in Oakland and all these other slogans, they still show up.
And now we go to the World Series prediction. I mean, honestly, I don't know how to follow that up, but I was like, yeah, that's pretty deep. I mean, knowing the history of the A's, and especially, unfortunately, it seems like they're the transient team because, they had one city, then they became a second-class citizen in that city. Then they go to Kansas City, and then Charlie Finley wants to move them out of Kansas City. And then they move to Oakland, and then all of a sudden Charlie Finley can't afford them anymore. And then it goes to the Haas family, and it goes to the Wolf family and all that other stuff. I mean, it's a situation that, unfortunately, there's cities chomping at the bit who want an MLB team. There's all this talk about Portland, but you're going to have to deal with the Mariners. And then there's this rumor that, because I hear it on the East Coast about, Nashville's looking for a city, which everybody's saying they're pegging the Orioles to end up going there, but I doubt they're going to end up going there. Or Montreal, and that's Tampa Bay's issue. And it feels like that, other than Vegas, and seeing how stingy the Giants are with San Jose and everything else.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can stay in Oakland for a very long time, but who knows? I mean, if it isn't the city politics, it's ownership and it's everything else. And then, the fans unfortunately are getting stuck in another situation what they've seen before. Just change it from Davis to Wolf, and you've seen this situation before, a team being jerked around, and the fans are the ones who end up having to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because a lot of people really do love, like, even the players love the fans and in all the sports that were there. You go to Oracle when the Warriors were still there. It was one of the loudest stadiums you could go to go watch a basketball game, almost always sold out, even when they sucked. You go to, a playoff atmosphere for the A's, and it's, again, one of the loudest stadiums that you're going to play in. The Raiders fans are insane. One of my buddies I do stand up with, he was actually just at the Raiders game, and he was going wild like he does in Oakland. And when none of them Raider fans, they were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he said that." It's like, it's a different world, Oakland, and it's a different mentality. So when you take these teams out, it changes the identity of the fans. And they do travel, but it's not going to be the same kind of experience when you go to these games for these teams. And looking at Las Vegas, that probably makes the most sense because not only do they have the NHL team, now you have the Raiders there, and the Allegiant Stadium is beautiful. I was just there last week. It is really nice. They did that team really well. But looking at Oakland, it's not really anything that the city can compete with, really, because they don't have the infrastructure set up to supply as much money as they're asking, to put in a privatized business and not really reap any of those revenues. So the city's trying to rebuild a lot of Oakland and take care of streets. They're doing a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense to me as far as some of the streets go, but they're trying to put other things in, and the team is not a priority. And you can see that in the way that our mayor, Libby Schaaf, handles it. But it's also reality. You got to think of, what does the city really need? Unfortunately, yeah, that'd be some jobs lost, but at the expense of what? Because Oakland is not necessarily thriving in the way that gentrification has really hit our town, and people are getting forced out into other areas, going to Austin, going to places like Seattle, all out of the Bay Area. And a lot of people I grew up with who love the A's, love the Raiders, love the Warriors, we're not able to go to those games anymore because we've been priced out and the teams are all leaving. So it's been a hard road to be an Oakland fan for any sport, really. And you hope that, Major League Baseball would step in and be like, just stay in Oakland. But I don't think that any of the major sports want a team out here. I don't think that it's conducive to what it is that they want out of a franchise, whatever league that might be. But it is what it is, man. I mean, I don't identify myself with the team like I used to. And it's really hard to kind of admit that sometimes, because I used to say we, now I don't really do it anymore because they don't pay me. So I don't have to do it. Mm-hmm. But it's unfortunate to be a fan in Oakland, really, because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of commitment to keeping a lot of these teams that bring a lot of pride to our city here.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. And as we go on to the World Series prediction, who do you have coming out of the American League? Who do you have coming out of the National League? Who wins it all, and in how many games?
So for me, it's between LA and San Francisco coming out, just given the depth of the bullpen, really, and how much the bullpen plays a role in the playoffs and then into the series. I think that the staff for LA can carry the team because they got some crazy arms on that team. It's ridiculous. But looking at how many home runs the Giants have been hitting, all year, I think that they can fall into some wins during the playoffs. I would say San Francisco probably has the best chance to make it out of the NL. And, man, it's a little bit harder to say with the AL because I haven't paid as much attention to it. But I would if I was going to put money on it, I'd put money on either Houston or New York. So I think that because Houston matches up pretty well with San Francisco, it'd be a little Orange World Series, it would be like a little pumpkin series. I think that probably San Francisco would win in probably 6.
As we start to wrap this up, and I really appreciate you, Chris, and I would definitely want to have you back come our NBA or NFL playoff preview when it comes to calling the Raiders or calling the Warriors. What are ways that people can reach out to you? And do you have anything you want to promote as well?
Okay, so actually, I do stand-up comedy. I mean, that was the reason why I was in Vegas last week for World Series of Comedy. That is a great festival. If you guys are ever around and see World Series of Comedy, that's a really cool thing because you get people from all over the country competing, and the finals are actually in Las Vegas. But aside from that, really, nothing else really other than my Instagram, soy sauce, butter, and rice, all one word. You spell out the A-N-D. You can catch me on there. I post a lot of stuff in my stories about where I'm going to be whenever I do shows and how you can hit me up. You respond to anything. I usually respond in a day or two. And if you're funny, I'll fuck with you.